Good morning. Good morning. Donnie kind of scared us. The baby jumped when she got up here and was like, oh my God, they're coming after me. I want to thank you all for this invitation. I never take it lightly. I never take it lightly when people actually ask to hear your voice. And I don't take it lightly to stand before any people and dress like this, which means I stand in a place in which I'm hoping to bring a word from God. So I'm happy to be here. I am pleased. I had a great time last night, a beautiful dinner, thanks to the Church of the Redeemer, the Episcopal Church that hosted us for dinner last night, and thanks to my dear friend and colleague and partner in Troubling the Waters, Donnie Anderson, for work that we have been doing for years together. I bring you greetings this morning from the National Council of Churches, where Jim Winkler is our General Secretary and President, and Bishop Darren Moore serves as the chair of our board. I think we're doing good work, troubling the waters ourselves. Last year, the NCC launched an anti-racism and truth-telling initiative under the acronym of ACT NOW: Awaken, Confront, Transform. Now to end racism. That's a big work. I thought we'd get it done by the end of this year. So far, it seems like we still have a whole lot to do. But ACT is this idea of again, awakening our communities, particularly people of faith, to the realities of racism and its impact in our lives, and confronting that, calling it what it is. There's so many ways that we try to, I'm reading a book right now called Until We Reckon, by, I think it's Danielle Sarid, and she is does work around the criminal legal system, and she says in one part that in America we have a history of addressing issues kind of departmentalizing. So we think we can do, for instance, poverty, but not address racism, or we're going to work on mass incarceration and not address racism or sexism and those kinds of things. In this way, so in our initiative, the goal is to do our work with the lens of understanding and paying attention to how racism is systemic and address that issue. And then, of course, T being transformation. As people of faith, we believe that if we are awakened and we are willing to confront, which is also an aspect of confession, that God can work in and through us to transform these systems and structures in our lives. So that's the work that we're trying to do. This morning, you all have asked me to come to talk to you about poverty. I'm a person who loves biographies. I am intrigued by people and their lives and how they came to be. So I love movies about people's lives. I read books about people's lives. And this morning, the person's life that I would like for us to reflect on as we talk about how to do the work that you're doing in a holistic way, as ways of encouragement, and yes, in some ways challenging. I would like to introduce you to those who don't know, and reintroduce you to, for those who do know, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. So Richard, where's Richard? He has a little clip. We're going to do a little bit of clip to let the video introduce Miss Hamer to us.
The testimony before the Credentials Committee, the FDP had a lineup of very different people. They had Rita Schwerner, the widow of Mickey, who had been killed in Neshoba County. They had Martin Luther King. Everybody knew King.
The seating of the delegation from the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party has political and moral significance far beyond the borders of Mississippi or the halls of this convention.
But the highlight of the testimony was that of Fannie Lou Hamer. The sharecropper who had been evicted from her plantation had come to symbolize the Mississippi movement.
Mr. Chairman and to the Credentials Committee. It was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen.
The president, Lyndon Johnson, he's not afraid of Martin Luther King's testimony. He's afraid of Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony. And so he decides that the country should not see her testify live.
Johnson is in the White House, and he convened an impromptu press conference.
We will return to this scene in Atlantic City, but now we switch to the White House and NBC's Robert Goralski.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
On this day, 9 months ago.
He did it knowing that they would break away, thinking he might announce who his choice of vice president was going to be. Instead, he gets up there and he announces, get this, he announces that it's 9 months to the day since Governor Connolly, who was there, was shot along with President Kennedy. So he announced a 9-month anniversary. Everybody's scratching their heads.
Thank you very much.
And then he leaves. And by that time, Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony was over. However, it backfired on Johnson because it became a story that she had been taken off television, and in the news that night and for days afterwards, they replayed her testimony.
I was carried to the county jail and put in the booking room. They left some of the people in the booking room and began to place us in cells.
She had Mississippi in her bones. Martin Luther King or the SNCC field secretaries, they couldn't do what Fannie Lou Hamer did. They couldn't be a sharecropper and express what it meant, right? And that's what Fannie Lou Hamer did.
And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was the State Highway Patrol. He said, "We're going to make you wish you was dead."
I encourage you to go to YouTube and listen to Ms. Hamer's entire testimony. It's only 8 minutes or so, and it's extremely powerful. So today I'd like to speak to you lessons learned from Fannie Lou Hamer on fighting racism and poverty. What we learned from Ms. Hamer are a whole bunch of things. One of the first things that pops up for me is that profile matters. For Fannie Lou Hamer, poverty was personal. She was poor, as in without money, and sometimes food or resources were lacking. But she was not impoverished, in that she was not lacking strength or vitality. Poverty was exacerbated by the fact that she was a black woman and in rural Mississippi. How she saw and experienced oppression was influenced by her profile. Her grandparents were slaves, her parents were sharecroppers, and she and her husband were sharecroppers. She started picking cotton at the age of 6 and had to drop out of school to help her family at the age of 12. She said that she didn't know that black people could register to vote until she attended a SNCC meeting in her 40s. That knowledge, her passion, and training transformed her lives and others. You don't have to be poor to care about poor people, but you do need to know some people impacted by poverty. You should be a relationship with them. Work on being an ally and not a savior. It should be something that you're passionate about. I remember one time struggling with my call and what was next for me right as I was getting out of seminary, and I talked to a really good friend who was very active in social justice activities, and I always had a passion for justice. I believed that, you know, going to church was one thing, but somehow what we were getting in our faith was supposed to also make a difference, not just in our lives, but the lives of others. And so I talked to this friend because I was really struggling, and she said to me, "What makes you cry?" What makes you cry? And so one of the things I'd ask you as you all are engaging in this work is, does this issue make your heart heavy? And does it move you not just to make you cry, but then to do something? Recently, many of you may be aware of this, but just at the end of last year, there was a bill passed called the First Step Act. That's a criminal legal system reform bill. Many people joined in on this bill, many organizations. The National Council of Churches does a lot of work in coalition, just as you all are doing. I am so impressed with the fact that you all are a statewide coalition doing the work that you do. I have a difficult time working closely with people who are all in the same building in DC. But coalition building is very difficult. So we have two different groups that I do a lot of my work with. One is the Interfaith Criminal Justice Coalition, which many of faith organizations that are represented right here are part of that group. And we come together and do a variety of advocacy and so forth around criminal justice reform. But then there's also a group called the Justice Roundtable, which is over 100 civil and human rights organizations, in addition to our faith organization being a sub-part of that. And so we've been working on these issues for years. One of my colleagues just recently retired from the Open Society Foundation. And she said a couple of summers ago, I was with my intern, and she was like, I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. And the intern turns and he goes, Rev, she said a quarter of a century. She didn't say 25 years. I said, yeah, that's because that's what it feels like, a quarter of a century. You know, so all of this work and finally things are kind of coming to a head. Well, we as an organization had real problems with that bill. And it was a kind of troubling, literally troubling in my spirit and in my soul. I couldn't sleep at night. When I looked at what it is that we were trying to say was okay and good, brought tears to my eyes. And you might say, but it was a good bill, at least that's what it says in the newspaper, what they say on television. But then, as I was struggling with it, I saw a letter that was written by an organization that is predominantly formerly incarcerated people. And they were opposing the bill. And they had really good points explaining why. And I reached out to them because they were the group that I should be following, I felt. And I reached out to them, and then we were in conversation. So it ended up being Just Leadership Foundation, Just Leadership USA, which does capacity building and training, offers fellowships for formerly incarcerated persons who are activists in around the issues of criminal justice and incarceration. We partnered with the National Council of Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, who actually write legislation that impacts women who are in prison and out of prison. We partnered with College and Community Fellowship, which is headed up by a woman who was formerly incarcerated, and their focus is on doing incarceration, educating women who have been incarcerated. That was important to me because these are people and organizations that are not just directly impacted. I mean, their lives in many ways were both uprooted and turned upside down as a result of this broken system. And so when we joined forces to oppose this bill and then drafted a letter that got another over 80 organizations sign on to our letter, I said to my office, I said to Jim Winkler, who was concerned because many of our partners, many of our colleagues were signing on. It was almost like this huge, it was like an out-of-body experience. Everybody was jumping on. And mostly I think it was because they felt like if everybody else is on, we have to too. But as people of faith, I said, I don't have to be okay with what we considered a piecemeal, watered down, bipartisan support. When you get to the lowest common denominator today, it really means you're not getting a whole lot accomplished. And I know that's a difficult thing because the whole thing is we got to pass bills, but no, we don't. I stand, when I walk into my meetings with Congress, I'm the one that sits at the table that says, well, I'm looking to have God's will on earth that is in heaven. And then we negotiate down from there. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's where we're starting. I mean, so we don't go in thinking, we don't walk in saying, what is it we think we can get? We go in saying, this is utopia. And that is what we're looking for. And believe that somewhere, somehow, that is actually a possibility in our lives. So we opposed the bill. We opposed it because it was not progressive enough. As I mentioned, it was very piecemeal. It did not address the intersectionality of race and mass incarceration. The whole issue right now, everybody, you could have been living under a rock right now. But if you even come out of that rock, one of the first things you're going to hear, among others, is that there's a big mass incarceration issue in this country. The United States is what? 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. There are over 2 million people in prison, and another 4+ million who are under the incarceral system through probation, parole, and now we got people, Michelle Alexander calls electronic monitoring the newest Jim Crow. And then people like to call it ankle bracelets. I was like, now I can't even wear a cute ankle bracelet. You know, no, an ankle bracelet is a little cute thing you put on your ankle to be cute and wear your little high heels or your flip-flops. It is not an electronic monitoring system that keeps the government connected with what's happening in your life and your entire community. So I promised this community of people that I worked with on this issue. This was a learning experience for me. I've always believed this and I thought I was doing it, but I was much more intentional and continue to be intentional. I don't make a move. I don't make a decision without checking in with that community. I've never been in jail. I know people who have. I've been a victim of crime, which also impacts the way I understand the system. But these are my advisors and consultants now. And I promise them that if I get invited to a table addressing the issue of mass incarceration, if there is not someone at that table in a decision-making leadership role, I am going to bring it up. I'm going to invite somebody to the table, and if that's not acceptable, I will leave the table, because that means they're not trying to do the work. Fannie Lou Hamer was a living reflection of the power of lived experience. I only gave you a little clip of her voice, and that's why I encourage you. In fact, I'll tell you right now, when you go on YouTube and see her testimony, you'll find yourself just Googling and wanting to hear her voice. I mean, the passion that comes out of her telling her own story. She did not speak truth to power. She spoke the truth in power. She wasn't afraid of anybody. Only she could tell her story and get the impact that it had. When she testified before the Credentials Committee, as you noticed, they said how the president was not afraid of Dr. King. They were afraid of Fannie Lou Hamer, so much so that he preempted all 3 of the TV stations at the time. I mean, just think about what that would look like now. So he preempted TV that night in order to keep her voice from being heard. That is how afraid he was of what she was attempting to do and the power of her voice. Also, after being threatened by the sheriff for trying to get registered to vote, she said, I guess if I had any sense, I would have been a little scared. But what was the point of being scared? The only thing they could do was kill me. And it kind of seemed like they've been trying to do that a little bit at a time since I could remember. Once you get over the fact that what is the worst that can happen? And what is the worst that can happen really varies based on our privilege and who we are and the positions we're in. What's the worst that could happen? When her landlord evicted her from her home and the land that she farmed for registering to vote, he told her that Mississippi is just not ready for black people to register and vote now. And she told him, I didn't do this for you. I did this for me. sometimes those of us in privileged positions are more apt to compromise and settle for less. I did a lot of work on immigration issues with American Baptist churches before I came onto the National Council of Churches. And one of the big debates was exactly what would be what would be acceptable if we ever got an immigration deal that we would vote on. And there were those who said they would accept. Some people said they would accept a legal status that did not include a pathway to citizenship. And there were people willing to think about whether or not that was a compromise that was acceptable. And one of the things that I said, and I did say to them as an African American woman, understanding the impact of the Dred Scott decision, that anything less than a pathway to citizenship, even if it was going to be a long one, even if it was one that people were like, this is just going to be, we should never, ever accept people being legally dehumanized in this country. That's right. The Dred Scott decision, actually every justice on the Supreme Court at the time wrote an opinion. Most people remember the Chief Justice's decision. There was a plurality as to the outcome, which basically said that Dred Scott did not have legal standing. But the statement that Taney made as the Chief Justice was that no black man had any rights any white man was bound to respect is often quoted. But what was really significant about that decision was that in that decision, black people lost access to citizenship. And in America, the way the decision is read, and I think we live this out to this day, which is why we're constantly fighting about seeing people being human, fully human. That decision said that black people were not human. And so even free black people lost access to various rights. And that's why it took a civil war and several amendments to at least make us human on paper, because we're still working towards that. So sometimes if we allow those who are in privileged positions to speak on our behalf, it's too easy to compromise because you're not impacted. Deanna Hoskins, who's the executive director for Just Leadership, said, "No movement has ever been successful until those most oppressed rise up into leadership and demand change." And A. Philip Randolph's, one of my favorite statements from him says, "Justice is not given, it is exacted. Freedom and justice must be struggled for by the oppressed of all lands and races. We're all in this together." Fannie Lou Hamer also understood that this work was a combination or an intersection of purposeful policy, practical solutions, and strategic partnerships. Purposeful policy, she noted how voting impacts everything. She understood the intersectionality of issues and policy. It's so interesting to me how we will address issues. There are people who will talk about racism or talk about poverty, but never understand not just the interconnection of poverty and racism. There are poor white people as well, but poverty and policing. In rural communities, poor white people are treated very similarly as what we see for black people in larger cities, which happens to be making all of the social media and public TV issues. So there's an intersectionality of poverty and issues like education and how people are treated in those communities. But she understood this intersectionality that addressed voter suppression, ensure that all marginalized and poor communities are included in census, for instance, advocate for children to get free lunch, whether or not their parents can pay the bill to the school? Are you all aware of that right here, somewhere in Rhode Island, Warwick Public School? I got a text from a friend. This is how my friends are. You know, they text me and say, I wish I could be there with you to just stand up there and say, excuse me, how is this happening? And this friend is in New York. She probably actually could have come. So in addition to the various issues that you all are working with, the policies, there's a whole lot of stuff that can be done. And we can't do all of it, all of us, all the time. So I don't know who in this room has any connection with the Warwick Public School system, but y'all need to get names before we leave, and everybody show up, if you can, tomorrow, and make sure those kids get a real meal for lunch. That's what activism does. You see something that's broken and you try to fix it right away. Sometimes you don't have time to do a plan and we're going to get this, we're going to schedule it for this or that. Those children should not be shamed because parents can't afford to pay for their lunch.
That's right.
Now back in my day, I got free lunch, but I think everybody in my school got free lunch. And we got cold lunch. They actually had cold pork and beans. I don't know why they did that. That was just wrong. But the reality is that this is, in today's modern, that is just not acceptable. And that should bring outrage to a group of people who are working on poverty issues. And I don't know if it's something that you're going to be doing in advocacy day, because you got to go to legislation and say, yeah, but this is a school district problem, it sounds like. So, looking at all the ways that you can have an impact. The education system here in Rhode Island. We have, someone said to me, you're not from here, right? I don't know if it was my accent or, the way I look when people said certain things about certain issues. But, everybody knows that wherever we're from, there's quirkiness as to our communities and places where we are, right? But I did not know that Rhode Island had an issue with not being one of the actually better school districts. And so those are issues that I would encourage you all to look into as you consider and think about ways to broaden and address your issues around poverty. What are the barriers that poor and other marginalized communities face in the community that lead to them having to deal with the criminal legal system, as I mentioned earlier? As I stated earlier about, most of the times when people are talking about the criminal legal system, we almost automatically think people of color. But it's such a bad system. It is true, I believe. I mean, it is absolutely true. I never refer to it really as a broken system, because it really does what it has been intended to do. We have the policing system has a history and connection with slave patrols. Our larger penal system grew out of various ways that we wanted to control and monitor the movement of black and then brown bodies, and even Native American communities, which really the way we decided to control that community is just to put them away somewhere. So we're talking about a need to uproot, dismantle. We've got my focus in activism now, and many people I'm working with, we have the in the meantime kind of work, which is one, meeting the basic needs of people. And then you have the interim in the meantime. You got to what can we get done, like at this juncture regarding legislation and so forth. But really what we're doing is tearing up the system right now because it's messed up. It's about dismantling. And there's a comfort zone that some of us have with those systems being what they are. And sitting here and looking at a bunch of people of faith, that's the church, the synagogue, and the mosque. Yeah, I know. But our traditional faith systems have some great things that are part of those traditions. But there are also aspects of those traditions that keep people out who are just not interested in being in an institution. And so people are seeking liberation and freedom. And so what I understand and know that your speaker last year was a very dear friend of mine, Pastor Tracy Blackman. So we have these conversations all the time. And one of the greatest experiences I had in understanding this, and it was Pastor Blackman that brought this up. And I tell people all the time, when people are talking about, people are like, how do we get people to come to the church? We're trying to do all this great stuff and they just won't come. Did you ask them what they wanted? Or better yet, did you go to where they were? Because church, community, congregation is where the people are, where the work is being done. And I went back to St. Louis. I was there the year Mike Brown was killed. I'm from St. Louis originally. And so I was in Ferguson a few days after Mike Brown was killed. And then I went back the following year, first anniversary. And in both times, some of the most profound experiences of spiritual and sacred space was at the memorial site where he was killed. I remember listening to Chris Hayes talking about what was happening in Ferguson. He's like, how news people are. It's kind of a festive experience, and people they're not really celebrating, but there's music playing, and there's food, and he was going on and on. And I was there with a friend of mine, and we were sitting in front of one of the apartment complexes on Canfield, in Canfield Village, and I started laughing. I looked at her, I was like, it's a wake. It's a community-wide wake. And the news media didn't know how to explain that. But the people had come together to tell stories and to mourn and to still celebrate a life and to plot and plan. But they did it. There's a Miss Kathy owned a little restaurant, and she brought tables out and put the food out, and it was free. And people ate, and there was a mic set up with a DJ, and you could come and speak and just do whatever you wanted, spoken words, sing a song, just express. It was a community-wide wake. There's also practical solutions. Several things that Ms. Hamer did. She created a pig bank, which is appropriate for rural Mississippi. So she bought several. Now, I don't know all. You got the pig, and then you got one that can give the birth, and then you got the boar. So she got enough. Like I think the boar is the male pig, and they impregnated all the other pigs, and then she would give pigs to communities and families, and that family could then their pig could give birth, and so there was this village of being able to provide food for your family through a pig bank. She created the National Women's Political Caucus. She was a co-founder of the Freedom Farm Cooperative, where they did capacity building and helping people understand how to take care of their farms. So there's this combination of planting, sowing, investing in communities and in people. She understood strategic partnerships. One of the things that you heard her say often was that nobody's free until everybody is free. So when we think of freedom, so often people think we're just talking about the freedom for those who are in marginalized communities, as in, people of color, or you're poor, or you're disabled, and, LGBTQIA community. The reality is we're all marginalized whenever anyone is marginalized. The community is limited and lacking in its greatest potential when anyone is lacking in their greatest potential within that community. Oppression does not help those who are oppressed or who are the oppressor. It's really interesting to me. You know how we always talk about, when you hear Jackie Robinson, you don't have to say it out loud, but just think in your head, what is the first thing you think about? What's that? What about him in baseball? Huh? Yes, we say he was the first black man to play in the major leagues. We don't say he's the first black man that white people let play in the major league. It's as if he just walked up one day and decided, I'm going to play. And for years, none of the other black people wanted to play in the major league. We don't acknowledge the fact that he broke through, he didn't break through the system. The system decided, the system with, and I don't remember the individuals, but the team manager and others at that time made strategic decisions that we have to do this. Some of us would have said it was, too little too late, or it wasn't enough, but it did what it did. But those are kinds of ways to begin to look at what are some, this idea that all of our freedom, another phrase she used, which I love, is that your freedom is shackled and chained to mine. And until I'm free, you're not free either. Shackled and chained. We never think of white people being shackled and chained to us, but that's true. And then justice and freedom, and this is really hard. What does that mean? On our racial justice work, anti-racism work, one of the consultants we've been working with actually asked myself and others who were part of the team as we were talking, he said, do you want, how did he put it? He said, do you want equality or do you want justice? Because if we decided today that everybody is going to get paid the same wages, or, same would be equal. Or are we going to try to correct the fact that for generations, there's been so much inequality? So justice is not just deciding, I say all the time that equality is not always fair, actually. You decide to pay a single black mother who's had generation after generation of poverty the same as a white male whose family has had generation after generation after generation of wealth, and you start that day giving them the same salary, you still have major inequality. And justice has not been met. The other thing about her strategic partnership is that Fannie Lou Hamer had a strategic partnership with the divine for the liberation of all. She had a strong faith in God. And one of her sayings, again, I just love some of the things that she said. Actually, just look up Fannie Lou Hamer quotes. She said that you can pray until you faint, but unless you get up and try to do something, God's not going to put it in your lap. She had a way of saying things, and only she could say it in the way that she could say it. But it's, and you all are doing a lot of that. Praying on your feet is a major thing. But not only did her profile matter, not only did she personify the power of the lived experience and grasp the real change came when there was a combination of purposeful policies, making practical solutions, and accessible and strategic partnerships with God and others. Fannie Lou Hamer, excuse me, put her physical body on the line. There's a price to be paid for freedom. And black people, and particularly black women, have been paying the greatest cost. A major cost. Another saying that she had, which is very well known by many, is that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. The public outcry, rightfully so, is that's happening right now, that we see happening in the streets with public police shootings, and often with black, unarmed black men. But women of color and poor women are dying due to healthcare disparities, the emotional and physical toll that racism, poverty, and caring for others has on our bodies. I shared with Donnie that I attended the funeral of a girlfriend, a friend of mine. We have this circle of girlfriend circle. It has this real unique title of the girlfriends. That's what we call ourselves. And we've been together for about 20 years. And most of us are in ministry in some way. And the first time we've experienced a break in that circle, one of our members died recently, and it was because people didn't hear her talk about what was going on with her health. Also, she did work around activism and advocacy, but she's one of many. I'm aware way too often of so many people. We have one colleague who's been in the ecumenical community for generations, died coming back from the Middle East. Literally didn't even, I think she got off the plane and she died. Fannie Lou Hamer's health situation, she had polio as a child. She was given, thank you so much. She was given a hysterectomy without her consent when she was being supposedly having surgery to remove his tumor. She was beaten so bad that her kidney, eye, and leg were permanently damaged. She was hospitalized at least twice for what we would call nervous breakdown or exhaustion. And she died of complications of breast cancer and heart disease. Racism and poverty cause trauma. And the other difference is, for people in privileged positions, depending on what that privilege is, there's a way that we get to choose sometime whether or not you're going to enter into the situation. But if you're living it, you don't get that choice. We don't get to decide whether or not we're going to really stand up regarding policing when our own driving while black is an issue. We don't get to decide whether or not you're going to address the poverty issues when your child is going to be getting a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and not a hot lunch because you can't afford to pay whatever the backup bill is. And what we're asking is that people decide to put your life on the line. And you don't have to do it. I tell my colleagues all the time, we all get to choose how we're going to engage. But it is not the responsibility of those who are oppressed to make you feel comfortable in the decision you've made when you've decided where you're going to stand. It's all good. Everybody can't be out in the street, but we can use our voice. And finally, she was persistent. Another favorite saying, she says, if I fall 5 feet, 4 inches for freedom. I fall 5 feet, 4 inches forward for freedom, and I'm not backing up. So these are kind of hard statements, but I really do think and believe you guys are doing great work. But you've been doing it for 11 years too. So what is it that God is saying to you now? What's the next? What's your level up? What's your move forward? What is putting little bitty Rhode Island on the map for this great work? Again, you all are doing an amazing thing. You got this many people in one room from across the state, from various faith traditions. You have representatives from your congressional leadership here. You realize how hard it is for some people to get somebody who's actually representing them to show up at something that actually addresses the issues that they're supposed to be voting on and dealing with? It doesn't always happen. So thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. But listen and discern what God is calling you to for your next act. Thank you for an opportunity to come before you. We'll be talking again later. Please write questions. And I have something else for you in closing at the end. Thank you.